if you make the conscious decision of purchasing a firearm, owning a firearm, and carrying a firearm, like, know how to use it.
Mm-hmm. Welcome back to the Talk Midland podcast. My name is Logan Richetti with Modern Realty. Today I have my friend Trent Gonyaw with Tri-City Tactical, and we're going to talk about defense, home defense, defense in public, situational awareness, and everything in between. Because, as you know, recently there was an event at the Olive Garden in Midland, and that events, when they hit close to home like that, make you think a little bit differently about how to protect yourself and how to protect your family. So where do we start?
Man, so I guess let's start off by condolences to the victim. Condolences to all the people who witnessed that event, because that's going to be tough for them to process through. Great job, pat on the back for those who stepped in. Great job to Midland PD for their response time and intervening and doing exactly what they were trained to do without causing further incident. Mm-hmm. And I think that's huge. I think that incident had a ton of potential to escalate into something else. And the fact that it didn't is really good. But yeah, so, man, there's a ton to unwrap here. But let's start with situational awareness, I guess. Just being aware of your surroundings is not the same as being hypervigilant, right? So, like, and I'll use an example, restaurants. I'm the guy who's, hey, I need a corner table, mm-hmm. or I need a table that my chair is against a wall, mm-hmm. so that I can see everything that's going on throughout the restaurant, right?
We call that the pay-in seat.
The what?
The pay-in seat. Whoever pays for the meal gets the seat that can see everything.
Okay.
It's a joke in my family, but yeah.
So, and I'm actually going to steal that for my next course. But there's so many times, like, my wife gives me a hard time, right? Like, stop being paranoid. We're in Midland, Michigan. Like, mm-hmm. nothing's going to happen, right? Mm-hmm. And that thought process is great, that we can live in an area where we can think that way. But unfortunately, you have the other side of the coin where you have to be aware of your surroundings. You have to know what's going on. And ladies, stop giving your husbands a hard time when they ask for that seat with their backs against the wall so that they can analyze and know what's going on. Because what they're doing is they're not just sitting back watching what's happening. Upon entering the restaurant, they're identifying points of ingress and points of egress. Mm-hmm. Where can I get in and where can I get out?
Mm-hmm. Always.
Where is my most likely avenue of escape, right? Where's my nearest exit? How many people are between me and the exit? How many people are going to use that exit? Is there an easier, faster route for me to take versus just that one exit, right? So these are all things that are taking place as, and they're rolled up into this simplistic way of looking at just a chair, mm-hmm. right? And it's not just a chair. And your husband or your wife or whoever it is not paranoid. They're just being situationally aware.
Yeah.
So, and I think, I don't know, guys tend to abandon situational awareness and they become a lot more lax than women do.
Really?
And you got to think about it, because women are preconditioned to be situationally aware since they're little. And it's unfortunate, but the reason is women oftentimes are more, they're more often victims than men are. So they're taught, I got to be aware of my surroundings. I mean, you hear it all the time where if you set a drink down at a bar, mm-hmm. and then you left it unattended, you're not going to drink that drink, right? You're going to order a new one.
Right.
Whereas guys tend to become a lot more relaxed in that sense. So I encourage everybody, really start to get in tune with that situational awareness. If you treated Midland like you treat downtown Chicago or downtown Detroit after going to a concert, a ball game, or whatever it is, because I know for a fact that based on our environment, we tend to even flow, right? Mm-hmm. But if you treated every location the same, where does that put you in terms of safety?
Well, let's go through that. So a restaurant's a good example, but you know, bookstore, mall, anywhere you're going, office building, any environment that you're not at home. The first thing, and I'm hypersensitive to this for whatever reason, I always have been. So maybe I'm unusual, and I know that you have a military background, so it's ingrained in your psyche and your training. But for whatever reason, I know there's an exit there. I know there's an exit there. And one of the things I never think about is how many people are in between, or what are the roadblocks to getting to the exits. But I always take the seat where I can see everything. I always try to take the seat back to the wall if you can, so you can see what's going on. Yeah. And another thing that I always do is I look at hips, hands, face, and then their feet.
Sure.
So you looking at the hips and the hands is where the threats usually come from immediately. Then you look at their eyes to see kind of what they're doing. And then obviously you go down to their feet at the end because it's less important, but that's where weapons could be stored, right?
So you're scanning for weapons?
Always.
Okay.
I scan everybody for weapons.
Cool.
And I have an entire 40 years of life with no traumatic experiences, no scary, real high intense, situations like that. But it's just something that I'm always, especially as a dad, extremely paranoid about, or at least vigilant about, if not.
So you're an outlier.
I must be.
You are an outlier to the norm.
So people listening, I wonder if you think about this stuff too. Do you, when you walk into a restaurant or a place of business, do you think about threats, or are you just really in that nice frame of mind where you don't worry about anything? Ignorance is bliss kind of thing.
So don't use the location as your starting point.
Yeah.
Let's look at how many carriers of, whether it's a knife, whether it's a baton, whether it's pepper spray, so less than lethal or lethal means, right? If you made a conscious decision to grab that specific item upon exiting your door, then you have come to terms that a potential situation could arise.
Sure.
So it's not about just the restaurant or just the bookstore. It's about your entire environment.
Yeah.
Right? And so I say that you're an outlier to the norm because most people don't get that in depth, right? And in fact, I would argue that when you're in a highly populated area, it's really difficult for you to scan everybody.
Sure.
It's difficult for you to scan for weapons, hips, feet, hands, eyes, right? And you brought up another great point. So right now you mentioned that there's 2 exits. Are there 2 exits or are there more?
I see 2 doors. I see a front door. I see a back door. What don't I see? What am I missing?
So I don't just look at doors. I look at what type of glass. Okay. Is it single pane? Is it double pane glass? How easily could I break this glass if I needed to escape out of this glass window?
Yeah, that's next level.
So it's not really next level though, because that's the type of teaching that Tri-City Tactical does with all of our students, right? And so we learn from previous mistakes, right? That's how most people learn. So you can look at, I can't remember the specific year, but Orlando had a big bar fire, right? And a ton of people died because they were all trying to stampede the one exit. And little did they know that there was a window nearby that they could have broke to continue exiting, right?
Sure.
So I look at situations like that and I say, okay, what can we learn from this situation and how can we implement it into our everyday life? Now, not everybody's going to do that. And I get that. We got to start with baby steps too. We can't make it overwhelming for people where they quit before they even try.
Yes.
Right? Because instructors, we are super guilty of throwing too much information at somebody, not breaking it down into layman's terms that people who don't have the same experiences as us understand. And then being able to crawl, walk, run, build off of the skill set that you have, and then continue to kind of push forward and develop your, we call them tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs for short. But essentially, it's just your emergency plan, your emergency operation plan. Everybody understands that word, emergency operation plan, especially Midland, right? When we look at the floods, there was an emergency operation plan put in place. They executed it. So everybody in this area understands what that is. So how do you develop your own personal emergency operation plan? And don't forget that that's not cookie cutter for every situation. It's environment dependent.
Well, let's go back to the restaurant scenario environment because that's what's recent.
Sure.
Now, there are two, I don't know for sure, but I think there are two versions of myself.
Okay.
The first version of myself is the one with my kids with me, and then the other version of myself is when I'm alone.
Yep.
And I'm a different person because my priorities are very different.
Sure.
If my kids are with me and there's an incident, my first and only priority is to remove my kids from the environment. And that might just be my own value system.
Okay.
I don't know, but break this down for me.
Go ahead.
Poke some
Continue,
holes
though.
in it. I'm just being honest.
Yep. Continue. What's the other version?
Well, the other version of me is if I'm in an environment that there's a threat or there's some kind of something going on, I hope that I would move towards the threat versus away from it to try to help save life.
Okay.
Now, a lot of that depends on my training. A lot of it depends on what tools I have and my confidence level under stress.
Yes.
You never really know until you're under stress, so it's easy to say what you're going to do. But I guess my point that I'm making first and foremost is if I have my kids with me, my priorities are different.
Yep.
I can tell you without exception, without a single doubt in my mind, I would have no problem taking action to protect my children.
Yep.
Where I wonder, and I think a lot of people might wonder what they would do in a scenario where you're walking down the street or you're in a restaurant and you see a guy pull a gun on his wife. What are you going to do in that scenario? And it's real easy to talk about what you're going to do.
Yeah.
But it's very different if you really kind of think about that actual threat because there's a lot of risk.
Sure. So let's break this down. For all listeners, I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice.
Yeah.
And if huge disclaimer on this is not legal advice.
Sure.
I am not teaching you legal use of force. Okay. I'm going to break this down how we break it down into our courses, right? There should always be two questions that you need to answer, right? In every situation, there's two questions that I want you to think about. Is it worth dying for? Is it worth going to prison for?
Sure.
If the answers are yes, then at that moment you can choose to
Take action.
take action.
Sure.
But your first step should always be avoidance. See, so I'm a USCCA instructor, United States Concealed Carry Association, right? They have this chart, which I actually really like, and it breaks down incidents as they're happening and what phase they're going into between avoid, escape, and defend, right? Those are your three steps of action.
Avoid, escape,
and defend. Some people might understand it as avoid, deny, defend, or, there's a ton of different, but essentially avoid, escape, defend, right? So it breaks it down to you by the seconds, though. It says, hey, if a situation is escalating, there's an argument, it's escalating, you have identified that situation is happening, you've had 30 seconds or more to avoid the situation altogether. Okay, you failed to avoid it. Now we're going into the escape mode, right? 5+ seconds. You have 5+ seconds from when it escalated from avoid into the escape period to get out, right? And avoid that situation. And then defend is 4- seconds, right?
Wow.
So 0 to 4 seconds. So why I bring that up? Okay, one, you're gaining crucial seconds by avoiding the conflict altogether when you identify that there was a potential for violence, right? Okay, you fail to do so. I call that you're in denial, okay? The reason I call that in denial is it's a lack of training. It's a lack of training on identifying a situation that could potentially turn violent. It's a lack of training on identifying social cues, body language. It doesn't have to be a gun that's pulled in order for you to know that it's a bad situation, right? So that all ties into your situational awareness. Understanding, okay, where's my environment? What's happening within my environment? What's going on? This looks, and again, I think I'm in the same position as everybody else. The information that I've had available is open source information that's been by reporters. How credible that information is, who knows, right? And I'm talking about specifically Olive Garden. So what it sounds like is that they were having dinner. They were seated there for quite a while before this incident started happening, right? And it started with an argument. And then it turned violent, right? So if I'm the table next to them, obviously I'm going to be able to pick up really quick that, hey, things seem to be getting a little bit escalated here. Maybe this is my line in the sand where I say, okay, I've got to get out of here, right? And that comes with your own plan, your emergency operation plan. So it's all tied in together, but it's how you execute it. Now, I do agree with you that you have different personas that you would, for the lack of better terms. My first priority when I'm with my kids too is to avoid any sort of situation when I'm with them, right? So good on you, yes. The second version of you is running towards the fight. Well, did you need to run towards that fight? Did you have good intentions? Sure. But did you become a liability? And that's a huge thing to answer too, because when we look at law enforcement and what they're trained to do, they've got already such a tough job, right? And if you start to incorporate a ton of bystanders, did you just make their job more difficult? Now, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying, like, you have to think about that component when you're developing your plan and saying, okay, I'm going to run towards the fight, but did you just become a liability, or did you make that situation worse than what it was supposed to be?
What is the average response time for a police in an event like that?
Yeah, so specifically talking about Olive Garden, Midland Police, I believe it was 2 minutes, which was incredible. Again, hats off to those guys. They did such a tremendous job. When you look at national average, though, you have to remember that they're taking every single department, whether it's rural or city, right? So 10 to 13 minutes is your national average police response time.
Jeez.
Which is super important when you're trying to develop your emergency operation plan, because there's so many people out there who live in this notion that, hey, the police will be there. You dial 911, they'll be there. That's not always the case. It's the rude reality of the world we live in.
Well, 2 minutes is a lifetime in Olive Garden if there's a gunshot.
Absolutely.
2 minutes,
sure,
as phenomenal as that is not enough to stop the threat.
Correct.
So, somebody there is going to have to do something.
Which, again,
they did.
There was some amazing individuals in there who stepped up, and it's great to see that there's still that amongst us, because I think the scrutiny of today's world, right, and how you can pretty much get in trouble for, anything and everything is huge. So them stepping up in that moment was great to see. Yeah, man.
Pretty cool. All right, so you're sitting next to this booth, in your booth, with your family.
Yep.
And you hear an altercation that's increasing in its intensity.
Yep.
Your first move is to grab the bill and exit the building?
So I have a specific phrase that my family knows. When that phrase comes up, they know that they need to
listen,
get out of Dodge quickly. So that would have been my first thing. The second thing is I would have probably moved to the counter to go get my bill, as opposed to staying at the table.
Okay.
I mean, this is so situationally dependent, right?
Yeah.
There's so many factors that play in this. And I can sit here and say I would have done this X, Y, and Z, and it could have played out completely different had I been there, in the first place. But there's also sort of a standard that, I have to stick to, because I'm an instructor, right? And I'm trying to teach people to have a personal protection plan, a personal defense plan. It's always avoid. Not a single one of us good instructors that teaches the use of firearms, the responsible handling of firearms, they're never going to say that this is your first plan of action, is to use it.
Yeah,
never.
We're not even talking about firearms yet, because in this scenario, all you hear right now is an altercation that's increasing in intensity, and your first strategy is to
get my
escape.
family out.
Yeah.
Correct.
And then after that, what was the second one?
So avoid.
Avoid.
Avoid is my first, and then escape.
Avoid, escape. So you're trying to avoid. You're not trying to deal with it. You're not stepping into this argument.
I'm trying to avoid the entire conflict before it escalates to something to a violent encounter.
And then it escalates to a violent encounter, and your second thought is to escape the environment. Now, that's tricky. It's easy to talk about now because we're not in danger.
Yep.
And it's certainly a lot easier to be tough when you're not in danger. But
sure.
Your booth next to you, a gun comes out. Your family's with you.
Yep.
What is the training answer of what you should do? And is it to exit? Is it to grab them and run? Or does it depend on angles?
Nope. So it comes down to two questions. Is this worth dying for,
Yep.
and is this worth going to prison for? If the
Okay.
answer is yes, then I execute my plan. So to answer your question, yes, angles are super important. Understanding overpenetration, super important. Navigating through a violent conflict with a ton of bystanders who are now in chaos, right? You can't train for that. The average civilian cannot train for that. So this is so subjective on what would happen.
It's hard to say.
On what to do. So I think that we use the example of what actually happened, right? And there was innocent bystanders who stepped up. They closed the distance. They secured that individual, held them to the ground, removed what could cause them harm, and waited for law enforcement. That was exactly the right thing to do.
It's pretty impressive.
Super impressive.
There's some heroes in there.
There are.
They probably saved some lives.
They saved a ton of lives. I mean, that's what I was saying to you when I said that situation could have turned completely. It could have been a totally different scenario.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you could have been looking at a ton of different things.
Well, I'm glad that those heroes stepped up and were able to make that split-second decision. But let's go back now and zoom out, because obviously we're getting into hypotheticals and what you want to say versus what you're supposed to say might be different, and I get that.
Correct.
But let's talk about concealed carry and the benefits and the risks and the considerations to be made, whether or not that should be something you add into your personal protection plan.
Okay. Can we go to owning a firearm before we talk about concealed carry?
Certainly.
Let's talk about owning a firearm, because there's something that I love to drill into people. In Tri-City Tactical, we promote responsible gun ownership. We love this country. We understand that not everybody agrees with firearms. We understand that people make the conscious decision of not carrying a firearm, which is 100% okay. There's other means that you can use for a personal protection plan. But in my opinion, responsible gun ownership means that not only do you own that firearm, you understand that firearm. And there's countless times, and and I'm going to blame myself as an instructor, and I'm going to blame the people who, I'm just going to take the brunt of the responsibility on why this is even a thing, right? So when we sell a firearm to an individual, it should be on us to try to educate and help as much as possible. And when you look at, since COVID till now, I mean, firearm sales rocketed, right? A lot of first-time gun owners. And what steps were taken to prepare that person to understand that firearm inside and out, right? That, to me, is responsible gun ownership. I know how to get this firearm into operation in the dark, in light, when my hands are wet, when I'm sweaty, when my heart rate's up, when I'm resting, in front of a static target, on the ground. Doesn't matter where I'm at, I can get that firearm into operation. I can address a malfunction. These are all steps that trickle into your training, right? So a lack of training is really what I want to bridge the gap to, because we've done a terrible job at educating people. We sell them guns. We don't educate them. They don't know how to use it. We don't hold them to a higher standard and say, hey, you should really learn how to use this firearm. That's part of being a responsible gun owner. And in order, for you to make the conscious decision of saying, hey, I want to get my CPL or not, I should probably understand what my gun does, how it functions, how it operates, how it loads, how it unloads, what is striker fired versus hammer fired, what is single action versus double action versus single action, double action. Like, these are all things that need to be taught in order for you to make a, informed decision. So responsible gun ownership, like, I want to hammer that, because it's more than just keeping your gun in the safe. Oh, I bought another gun today and it's in the safe and it only comes out once a year because I shoot with my friends at a bonfire when I'm drinking. Like, come on, man. But then you have and this is not everybody, this is 100% a generalization. I know I'm going to get lit up after this podcast comes out, but you have those individuals who are very much aware of, hey, I've got a pistol and I'm going to be like John Wick if somebody breaks into my house, or, I find myself in a violent encounter in the world, but I don't ever train for it. Mm-hmm. And that notion to me it's a little bit saddening, because you can't expect to perform at your highest level if you don't train for it, right? I mean, we don't grab people that don't work out, that don't, eat a healthy diet, and then just throw them into a 50-mile run.
Right.
Because they're not going to complete it, right? So this expectation that we're saying, like, oh yeah, I would have taken that gunman out at Olive Garden before he even shot his wife, is okay, cool, like, got it. Have you trained for that? If you haven't trained for it, how can you consciously say that you would have done that? Because, and what does your training plan look like? So gun ownership, right? That's super important to me. And for those of you who do not own a firearm, there's other means. Like, when you're developing your emergency operation plan, develop a training plan and stick to it. Go learn how to do some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or some striking, how to create distance and separation, and how to use items within a room to be able to create that distance and separation in order for you to avoid an escape. Like, these are all things that you should take into account. I'm not saying that a firearm is an end-all, be-all, and that you need to go out and buy one tomorrow. No, that's not what I'm saying. If you make the conscious decision of purchasing a firearm, owning a firearm, and carrying a firearm, like, know how to use it. Mm-hmm. So, and I would love to help you out with that.
Well, let's talk about the home defense plan.
Okay.
What do you suggest?
So this is a really fun topic for me. So home defense, what I would suggest to every single one of you is look at your house in the eyes of a bad guy. Pick apart your entire dwelling as if you wanted to break into it, as if you wanted to, cause harm to whoever's living there. If you start to look at things through that lens, things will start to stick out at you. You're like, wow, that's not really safe. That's not really secure. There's a ton of things that we have available to us, cameras and, security and alarm systems. And a lot of, people own pets. And like, there's so many things that we can, fail safes that we can put into place to be able to help us with our home defense plan. And all that is important. Then the other thing is, once you've established in your home defense plan, let's not call it a home defense plan. Let's call it a home security plan, right? Because you should incorporate fire. You should incorporate carbon monoxide. You should incorporate tornadoes. You should incorporate natural things that can occur to our dwelling that could cause us harm, right? All those should be incorporated into your emergency operation plan. Your evacuation plan is equally as important as when you're trying to pick it apart, seeing which way somebody might come in, right? And then the other thing is, once you've established your plan, now work your plan. Don't just say it looks really good on paper. Train it. Work your plan. Pick it apart. Find those shortcomings and address them, right? If you choose to use a firearm or whatever it is as part of your home defense plan, that's fine. Do that, but look at your angles. What are your most likely avenues of approach? How can you incorporate certain items that might cause a fatal funnel, which is an area that you want somebody to walk through, right? That gives you the advantage over them. What is your family doing while you're defending? Like, do they know? Is there a code word? Is there something that you guys say to be able to get them to evacuate? Do they know where to evacuate, where to go? What's your relationship with your neighbors? Like, all of these things play into your home defense plan. And home defense in itself is a beast, right? But I would say when you're looking at your home defense plan, look at it through the eyes of a bad guy. Don't just address bad guys. Address natural disasters as well. If some of you have small children and you're nervous, because I get this question all the time as an instructor. I got small kids. How do I bring up to them without scaring them that we're implementing emergency operation plan? Guess what? If you have kids that go to school they are preconditioned to go through emergency operation drills. They go through a number of fire drills, a number of active shooter drills, and a number of tornado drills every single year. Every single year they go through those. So don't be afraid to implement those exact same drills at your house because it's not going to be out of the norm. So those are other things to take into consideration.
So when you say implementing drills, you're talking about running your family through
Absolutely.
a mock
Yeah, absolutely.
issues.
Because how can you identify shortcomings in your plan if you don't actually run through it?
Yeah.
So, like, let's say you're on a 2-story, right? And maybe let's use a tri-level. A tri-level that the windows the second-story windows aren't a traditional second-story window, right? Maybe that's part of your evacuation plan. Well, can the sibling lower the other sibling down?
Right.
And how would you know that unless you actually practiced it
Sure.
and you planned it? So those are all things like, yeah, absolutely. Work your plan. Work your plan, tear it apart, and work it again.
So I'm thinking as you're talking, I have a lot of this conceptual stuff in my head.
Sure.
But my kids have no clue.
Yeah.
And my kids are scared enough to fall asleep as it is. To try to run them through a mock active shooter incident in the house would take a little creativity to make it fun.
Sure.
But I think I could do it.
Sure.
And every night before I go to bed, I check the front door, the back door, the side door. I lock every door. I put the right security lights on in the outside. I have my own protocols every single night.
Sure.
And I also have a dog, and I keep a door at a certain angle so I know I can hear things. And I sleep with one ear open anyway. And I am in charge of security for the house, just as you are.
Typical dad.
Typical dad, which is a huge burden, by the way. I don't think a lot of people realize, if you're not the head of security of your household, I don't think you realize the burden that's being placed on you every night.
Sure.
So I hope that people have empathy for for the dads and the moms and whoever's in charge of security, because it's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
And so as a responsible adult, we need to have these conversations. I'm learning a ton. And I'm thinking about things listening to you that I haven't considered enough and that I need to consider more.
Sure.
So thank you.
Yeah.
And I love that your overall arching approach to security is not just guns, it's not just knives. No. It's about having a plan, having protocols, and then training those.
And you gotta change that plan, because as society evolves, or as a family member leaves, or as you move to a different location, or you're like me and you accidentally divulge some of your plan, you've got to constantly tailor that plan and change it to make it, what it is, and then you have to practice that plan. So I'm in the same boat as you, especially with littles. And you brought up a really good point, making it fun, right? And I would say yes to a point, right? We don't want them to think that this is a joke.
Sure.
But at the same time, we don't want to, overbear them and scare them. And what I always teach is, hey guys, situational awareness.
Yep.
Teach your kids situational awareness. What does that look like? When you get in the car, don't shove a tablet in their face. Give them an objective. Say, hey, from where we're leaving to where we're going, point out to me 5 red cars, 4, people wearing a white shirt, 3 baseball caps. When you're in the store, admire. Give them an objective. They think it's a game, but what you're actually doing is you're teaching them situational awareness.
Cool.
And they're starting to become aware of their surroundings, and they're starting to notice things that you as the parent are distracted as you're shopping or as you're driving or as you're this and that. They've actually noticed it for you. So now they become an asset. Because now when you're out in public, you've already instilled some of those disciplines of situational awareness amongst them. They become an asset because they can now tell you, like, hey, I just saw this, or hey, this didn't look right. And obviously that comes with training and time and preparation and conversations and being able to break it down to a lower level. I got that. But the gist of it is, don't be afraid to incorporate your kids into those plans. They should be aware, and especially if you have kids that are at that age where they're starting to stay home alone, or you're not always 100% present right there with them to be able to hold their hand and guide them through those plans, for them to know exactly what it is that they're supposed to do, that's imperative.
All right, I want to open up here a little bit and ask you a tough question.
Okay.
I'm 40 years old.
Yep.
I'm a relatively athletic, relatively strong guy.
Sure.
Relatively sure of myself, but also I'm well aware that having a firearm increases my capabilities, but comes with some risks to me.
Okay.
And so what I mean by that is I make a lot of decisions whether or not to carry my firearm on my person based on maybe an incorrect equation of risk.
Okay.
And I think a lot of men, a lot of people in general, probably, if they're honest with you, would agree to me to some extent. I'll give you an example. For one thing, what I'm wearing right now is hard to conceal a weapon in a place that I can get it. I'm sure I could, maybe in my leg or something, but I struggle with the type of clothes I wear.
Yep.
A lot of working professionals struggle with clothes that can conceal a firearm. That's one. But the bigger one to me is my risk analysis is how likely do I need a firearm? How likely is it that I will need a firearm versus what are some potential liability for sure, and physical risks of carrying a loaded firearm?
Okay. So
Right?
that's a huge question. Let's break it down.
Does that make sense though?
Absolutely. So a good instructor is going to teach you not. So, okay, let me back up. As an instructor, I will never tell you how you should carry or where you should carry. Except my rule of thumb, and this is me, this is my opinion, me as an instructor, no organization or anybody's telling me this. My rule of thumb is maintaining positive control and positive control with both your eyes and your hands. Meaning, for anybody watching this, if you're carrying at the small of your back, do you have positive control of that firearm with your eyes and your hands? No. Okay. So, my rule of thumb is from the 9 o'clock to the 3 o'clock if I was looking at a clock, right? From the 9 to the 3. That means from the side of your hip to the other side of your hip and anywhere in front. You can maintain positive control of that firearm with your eyes and your hands.
Meaning you can see it, you can reach it.
You can see it and you can get to it.
Okay.
Okay. So that's one portion. Now the clothes and the type of holster and the type of firearm and the size of firearm and this and that all plays into your everyday apparel, right?
Sure.
But I argue to say that if you chose to wear a blazer with the way that you were dressed right now, you would be able to conceal a firearm easily, right? So it's really all about
Choice.
100% choice, right? I will never say, Logan, you need to carry a firearm when you leave your house. No, if you make the conscious decision of carrying a firearm, do it responsibly. Maintain positive control of your hands and your eyes. Make sure that firearm is ready to go. There's so many people that I know that are afraid of carrying with a round in the chamber.
Well, I'm one of those.
Okay.
So
That's a lack of training.
Let's be gentle there.
Let's be gentle. Okay.
Okay. It is lack of training.
Yep.
Without a doubt. I don't have enough training. I think 99% of people
So
own guns.
when I
don't.
say training, I'm not talking about getting rounds on target.
You're talking about just having it in and pulling it out the right way.
No.
And what are you referring to?
You don't have confidence in the way that firearm operates, which is why you're nervous about carrying it with a round in the chamber because you think that there's a potential for that gun to go off.
Exactly.
Okay. So it's a lack of training. Again, my fault. As an instructor, this is my fault because we have sold guns to people without giving them the opportunity to learn how that firearm functions from the most basic way of what is a slide? What is the slide doing? How does the magazine, elevate a round to be able to go into battery? What does it mean when there's a round in the chamber? How does the striking or the striker or the firing pin or the hammer detonate the primer,
Right.
the propellant to the projectile, so on and so forth? Like all of these are just things that are incorporated into a basic pistol shooting class. And this leads me to a great point. So many people, because as a concealed carry instructor, I get so many people who reach out to me, hey, I want to take your class. So I hit them with the deliberate questions. How much experience do you have with this firearm? How much experience do you have shooting this gun? None. First time, I just bought it. Don't know anything about this gun. That's why I want to take the CPL class. Okay. Newsflash. A CPL class is not designed to be a shooting course. It is not designed to teach you the basics of the firearm. Although we cover a lot of the basics and we do it really well and we go super in depth and we teach you so much information that day, it is not designed by nature. It is designed to teach you the legalities of carrying a firearm concealed. Okay? basic pistol shooting class. Tri-City Tactical, we offer them. There's so many other instructors that offer those classes. Reach out and take a basic pistol shooting class, because I guarantee you that if you became confident in how that firearm operated, you fully understood the mechanics of that firearm and what was happening, and the fail-safes put in place so that that striker or that firing pin or that hammer could not go forward without you deliberately doing it, then you wouldn't have the same concerns that you have today. The other thing is getting that firearm into operation, right? Trigger time. So I went to an event, and it's all going to come full circle, I promise. I went to an event, Bay City, a couple weeks ago called Golf, Guns, and Glamour, right? It was just kind of like an expo event. And one of the analogies that I used on stage when trying to tell people what Tri-City Tactical does and why we're so passionate about firearm and responsible gun ownership and training was, how many guys do we know collectively that love to golf? Right? They're on the golf course. When they're off the golf course, they're thinking about golf. They're watching videos on golf. They're swinging their clubs. In the wintertime, they're going to the simulators. But I would argue to say that golf club might save your life, but a firearm might save it more. And if you're going to take firearms serious, then with that same level of dedication and commitment that you have to your golf swing, then you should practice with your firearms, especially if you're considering those firearms and part of your defense plan, whether it's home defense, personal defense, out in the, like, dude, you just spent 27 hours swinging your golf club to make sure that you got rid of that fade or that slice so that you could just drive bombs down the middle. You bought that new gun, it sat in your safe, now you carry it on your person, but you only shot 30 rounds through it. Are you proficient with that firearm?
No.
So it's all training. I guarantee you that I could debunk your entire thought processing, your entire feeling with just one day of training.
I have no doubt about that.
No.
And I think some of it comes down to the selection of firearm that you choose.
Yep.
What kind of safety mechanisms it has. What kind,
Yes.
all those different elements
Yes.
that can go into those.
So that's a good point, and that was actually a question on your Facebook. Yesterday I went through them before coming in, and so one of the questions is, how do we, choose the correct firearm? And okay, an instructor is lying to you if he says exactly what gun you need. The guy behind the gun counter, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to take shots at anybody, but oftentimes those guys are just hired to work behind the counter. They're not shooters. So taking advice from the guy from behind the counter that's selling you the gun and doing your paperwork, like, tread extremely lightly, right? Find an instructor who has relative experience. That is my biggest thing that I'm always posting. Listen, guys, I would not go to a doctor to get seen for whatever illness I have if I knew he had no experience in the medical field and all he did was some online training, right? The same concept applies with finding an instructor. Find an instructor, seek out an instructor, and make sure he has relative experience in what he's teaching you. It drives me nuts that there's certain people that are teaching classes and they're teaching on what to do when you find yourself in a violent encounter, but they've never been in a violent encounter themselves, so how can they teach you? That's huge. Relative experience is huge.
All right, you made this for the Midland Association of Realtors. This is a concept that you put together for us. Thank you, by the way.
Yeah.
Stand up. Show up 10 to 15 minutes early at your open house.
Okay. So let me just explain that when I created this, I was not a real estate agent yet. So I understand that some of this stuff might be a little bit difficult, but situational dependent. If you're able to do these things, these are some simple steps to be able to help promote your overall safety in the event of showings. You're meeting strange people at strange houses that you've never been to. Oftentimes we don't know where the entrance or the exit is. Oftentimes we're not familiar with the area. So just keep that into perspective when you go through this.
All right, show up early, 10 to 15 minutes, which makes sense. I saw you here 15 minutes early waiting.
Yep.
And I know you were looking around and checking everything.
Yep.
Turn on all the lights. Common sense, but gives you better access to visual awareness. access points or emergency exits in the event you need to escape. Now, that's common sense, but a lot of people don't think about it ahead of time. We've been talking about this all day here. When you're in your house or you're wherever you are, well, how can you get away? Doors, windows, etc.
There's a big part that we need to talk about that. But go ahead and finish.
What is it?
Leaving yourself an out.
Yeah.
So, and this kind of plays into, again, ladies, when your husband is backing into a parking spot and you're yelling at him, like, God, why can't you just pull in forward? If I had to escape quickly and I pulled in forward, I'd have to do 2 movements, one back and one forward.
Yeah, I'm guilty of this all the time.
If I pull in backwards, all I have to do is 1 movement, put it in drive and go.
Yeah.
So if your steps are to avoid, escape, and defend, a big component in many of our lives to escape is our vehicle. If you're not mobile, get mobile. Once you're mobile, stay mobile.
Yeah, so anytime you can pull through, at a minimum, pull through a parking spot to be pointing faced out, you should do that.
Correct.
And back in when you're not.
So when you're pulling into a house,
Same thing.
if the driveway is only 1 car width
Yep.
and you're there first, park on the street.
Right.
Leave yourself an out. Because now if you pulled in first and they pulled in behind you, you have 0 out.
Right. Same thing with the back door. Unlock the back door.
Yeah.
You don't want to have the deadbolt and the lock locked on the back door if you potentially need to escape that way.
Correct.
If there's a fence, maybe unlock the fence or open the fence door.
Yeah.
Never leave your house without your EDC.
Everyday carry.
Yeah. So
EDC.
So this is how you feel. This is how you feel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I didn't say what your everyday carry was.
But whatever
Right?
that is.
So whatever your tactics, techniques, and procedures say that your everyday carry is, whether it's pepper spray, whether it's a pen, whether it's a firearm, whether it's non-lethal or lethal, don't leave your house without it.
Direct your clients where they should go through verbal commands.
Correct. So you've already turned on all the lights. You've unlocked the doors. You're there 10, 15 minutes early. You've already scoped the house out. You've got the layout, right? So then give verbal commands to your clients and say, hey, go down to the end of the hallway, turn right. That's the master. Let them go in front of you. Walk behind them.
Okay, that's one right there. Let your clients walk in front of you.
Correct. And that should be the last one.
Okay, we're getting there. Utilize the items in the house to create distance and separation.
Correct.
Like what?
So if the house isn't vacant, right, there's so many things that you can create distance and separation through. I don't need to stand right next to my client. If there's an island in the house, I can stand client, island, then myself. Right. Now I have a physical object between us that's creating some sort of distance separation, which then gains me crucial seconds in the event that I need to avoid or escape and get out of that situation altogether.
And then the last one, prevent clients from being behind you.
Correct.
There you go.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to learn more about working with Tri-City Tactical or set up a time to get some shooting lessons or take the course,
correct.
How do they reach you?
Check us out on Facebook. That's probably the easiest way. Tri-City Tactical on Facebook, Instagram, tricitytactical1@gmail.com. That's our email. We do have a CPL class coming up June 22nd. We've got a few seats available. Love to have some people out. July, we're going to be offering our basic pistol course. August, we're looking at doing our intermediate pistol course, which is the next step. Remember, I talked about crawl, walk, run. That's kind of our next step after that. So, yeah, check us out on social media. Follow us there. And if you guys have any questions, any concerns, feel free to reach out. I get so many people reaching out to me just to ask me, questions about, hey, how do I get my wife more interested in, shooting? Get with an instructor who can make it fun, make it relevant, but also oftentimes, like my wife loves guns that are colorful and are pretty to look at. That's what gets her interested in that specific firearm, then that's what I'm going to do. So just tips and tricks.
Trent, thanks for being on the Talk Midland podcast.
Yeah, thanks, man.